Hi, good afternoon, everyone. This is Gaurav Kapoor from Newristics. We will be starting this webinar now. So I know some people, there's about a dozen or so people who have joined, and I'm assuming a number of other people might be joining us in the next few minutes or so. But since each one of these webinars is only 30 minutes and all of you are very busy, we will start and end on time and maximize the time we have together. So this behavior is a new webinar series that Newristics has introduced. It's very targeted for pharmaceutical market researchers and marketers to help them better integrate and better implement behavioral science in their day-to-day marketing. So this is not a one-time webinar, although you are welcome to join only once or every time. It's really dependent on your interest and your schedules. But the way it's designed is to be a ongoing series. It'll be once a month. So just to give you, many of you are as marketers and researchers, and you work on positioning our value proposition statements, and many of you are familiar with this kind of a framework. So we thought it might be just interesting to introduce using that framework that is already familiar to you what behavior is. So it is a 30-minute class every month. It's designed to make behavioral science more actionable for you. Why? Or because behavioral science is a very powerful tool that is available to you to help both understand and influence customers, and especially non-conscious behaviors of your customers, the ones that they themselves are not even aware of, and therefore never explain those behaviors in research to you, and often actually when it's pointed out to them, don't admit to those behaviors either. We'll talk more about that. So that's basically the reason for why to be interested in this field. Our assumption is if you're here today joining this class, you already are interested in this field and have probably read enough things, articles, books, etc., to be dangerous enough in behavioral science to want to learn more, and you have already made attempts to want to make it actionable for yourself on your own efforts. How it's potentially going to help you, it implemented well, behavioral science will help change the trajectory of brands, for the brands you're working on, because your marketing and market research efforts will be a lot more laser targeted towards changing customer behaviors the way you want them, or the way they should be to optimize care for patients in your disease states. So that's really the background on behavior. What got behavior really started or initiated was in meeting, we, people from Newristics would often hear something similar to what is on this slide on page 3. Oftentimes people would say, I'm very intrigued by this field. I read books, I read articles, I have, attended a session with Dan Ariely, or I've watched a TED Talk, etc. And then as we talk more, they would either admit themselves, or we would get the sense that the knowledge has not been converted into action yet, for whatever reason, a variety of reasons. They have not been able to figure out, they know what loss aversion is, they know what hyperbolic discounting is, etc., but they have still not figured out a way to apply it to their brand or to their business. So that really is the genesis of Behavior Masterclass series, and our goal, and we'll try to stay as true to it as we can in every class, is to give you very actionable knowledge in 30 minutes at a time that you can literally apply it as soon as the class is over. That may not always be very possible, but that's our attempt from our side, and that's our commitment to you if you are taking the time to attend this class. So here's how behavior classes will be organized. In each class, we are going to take 3 heuristics and biases and educate you on what those are. You may already know what they are, but hopefully we are bringing new understanding about those heuristics and biases to you. We will help you understand how those heuristics and biases affect decision making. We will rarely get into the specific nuances of that heuristic in your disease state, but we will take examples. We're going to teach by way of examples. So we're going to take a lot of examples to basically help you understand how each heuristic or bias affects decision making in a given disease state. And then we will share, again, using examples, we will share with you how to use that heuristic in market research to better understand customer behaviors, and also use it in marketing to, and this is a term you may already have heard if you have met somebody from Newristics or talked to people from Newristics, how to feed or fight specific heuristics through your marketing and messaging efforts is something that is a very effective marketing strategy that we will also try to educate you on how to do that. So we're going to jump right in. Let's take the first heuristic. So we're going to take heuristics, kind of randomly. These are not chosen in any specific order or sequence. These are among many of the very heavily utilized and dominant heuristics in pharmaceutical industry. Physicians, patients, payers are using these heuristics that we will be discussing. And they're affecting decision making in different ways depending on the disease state, et cetera, which you will get a flavor of. I should say one thing. I did not introduce the idea of what a heuristic is. I am assuming you know that. So if you are here at this class, you have done enough background research on what heuristics and biases are and how mental shortcuts, i.e. heuristics, drive people's behaviors without them knowing or realizing that, and how this whole body of science has brought to the surface the irrationalities of human decision making and has even won multiple Nobel Prizes in economics and psychology, etc. So I'm not really covering that kind of background or primer, and if any of you do need that, please send us separately, send us a note. We can provide information on that, or separately, cover that with people individually. The first heuristic we're going to cover is rule of consistency. So let's first introduce what that even is. And this applies to many of us, if not all of us. In some aspects of our own lives, we might also have we might also use this heuristic or this bias to make decisions. Rule of consistency means that we want to appear consistent in our lives. We have a two-pronged need on rule of consistency. One is in our own eyes, we need to appear consistent. This is who I am. This is how I do certain things. I always go to the gym. I go to the gym at least 3 times a week, and if I don't feel myself. I never lie, or whatever the rules are that you have created and accumulated over your lifespan so far. They have become, in some cases, they have become literally a definition of you, a part of you. And you are both focused on maintaining that image of yourself in your own mind, as well as a projection to others. And where science tells us this rule of consistency heuristic becomes somewhat of a judgment error is when people start making decisions in life simply to hold on or to protect their rule of consistency. And deep down inside, they either already know that they should stop doing that, they need to change, or maybe they are kind of just rationalizing their behaviors to themselves. Either way, they don't fix the problem, i.e. they keep following the rule of consistency just because they need to protect the image that they have created for themselves in their own minds as well as in the minds of others. That's what rule of consistency heuristic means, and that's how it often can lead to, it doesn't always lead to irrational decision making. In fact, there are many a time when it actually helps you make good decisions. But there are other times as well where it can lead to irrational decision making. So let's take some examples. This is a good example of what we're going to do is we're going to use non-pharma and pharma examples to help you internalize heuristics and biases that we're going to present in each class in a variety of ways. Obviously, the most direct application that will help you in your day-to-day work is the pharma applications we're going to discuss. But understanding the heuristics at many levels will actually improve your ability to integrate them into your marketing. So let me first introduce at a kind of using an example from everyday life that everybody can relate to, especially women if they're attending this class as well. Some women, they will be able to relate to even more. In the cosmetics category, facial cosmetics especially, rule of consistency drives how what the woman has to do throughout the course of a day or over time, every day, all year long, to maintain the look that she has defined for herself. And this look was defined probably when she was a teenager. It does evolve over time. It's not like it never changes. It does evolve. But the need to consistently project an image or that look for herself is definitely there in the back of the mind. One of the ways we help people understand and internalize this to say, what would happen? A woman, like if you ask them, what would happen if you were to go to work for 3 days in a row with no makeup on? How would people view you differently in the workplace? And would that actually affect your thinking as well? What you think about yourself? And would you pick up very subtle cues or nuances about people's interactions with you that'll give you a sense that, that something is different? Now, if you do research in customer behavior in this category, a very interesting dynamic emerges from understanding this heuristic or rule of consistency. As the woman ages, maintaining the look becomes harder and harder because the skin changes and you also change as a person. If you are really bound by the rule of consistency heuristic and you really feel the psychological need to maintain your look and continue to protect that image that you have created to yourself, but you also, on the other hand, are becoming more natural and more knowledgeable about chemicals and cosmetics. You want to be more clean, you want to be less chemical dependent, etc., etc. Now there's an internal conflict that is created potentially in you. On one hand, your rule of consistency heuristic pulls you in one direction. On the other hand, your knowledge and your rational needs, if you will, about using less chemicals and being more natural and organic pulls you in the other direction. So, and that's actually one of the reasons why large companies like Bare Minerals or the entire segment of mineral cosmetics even exists, right? Because to address this conflict, that you can potentially maintain your look and be less chemical dependent. So it is an example of from everyday life about how rule of consistency can drive decision making in some very interesting, very complex ways. Now let's take a pharma example. If there's anybody who's worked in immunology, who's worked in psoriasis, here's an example of how in psoriasis, when people are originally diagnosed or in the early years of kind of, like living with their psoriasis, They are very focused on how their skin looks and how they look to other people and what other people think about my skin, et cetera, et cetera. Over time, your psoriasis self becomes your real self. And it becomes, and some, not all, some patients can even take the new normal as a character building challenge for themselves. Like it is, I am who I am because of my psoriasis. I have become a stronger person because of the hardships that I have actually gone through in my life, in my over last 10, 15 years, whatever, living with this condition. They would never go to the extent of saying, I can't imagine life without psoriasis. It's not that, but it is kind of become part of who they are. It's become an integral part of their psychology. And some patients may be driven by this rule of consistency so much that they fail to see there are a lot of patients who are on first generation older drugs, whether they are like TNF type based drugs or the older therapies that are available, and they have not switched to the newer therapies, even though the doctor may have brought it up, they have seen commercials, et cetera, et cetera. And a very simple explanation for that would be cost. But we all know that that's almost never the for most patients. Yes, for some patients, of course, it is the case, or it is the dominant factor. So now what we want to show you is, we'll show you a couple of examples. We've pulled a lot of examples from pharmaceutical marketing that help you kind of bring each heuristic to life. And you will form your own judgments about, now that you understand what that heuristic is, and now you also understand, how a brand may be using it, you can decide for yourself if they're doing a good job, or they could, or they're using it incorrectly, or they could improve it, et cetera, et cetera. But let's show you some examples now. Before I do that, are there any questions so far? These classes are very short and very quick, so that's why I'm going at a rapid pace. But I also do want to encourage questioning and any comments or thoughts, et cetera, that people have. Okay, I'll keep going, but feel free to jump in as needed. Here is a first example we're going to share with you. This is from psoriasis. So we just shared how rule of consistency heuristic can potentially drive decision making for patients and in a very complex kind of psychological way. So now let's take a look at a brand that is advertising on air right now and using an interesting kind of creative strategy for how they want to communicate or how they want to, relate to the psoriasis patient. So here we go.
See me.
See me.
See me.
Don't stare at me.
See me.
See me.
See me to know
that psoriasis is just something that I have.
I'm not contagious.
See me to know that I won't stop
until I find what works.
So now you can see that in this ad, the whole idea of see me, not my psoriasis, is something that's being leveraged. And the insight that we shared earlier about how a person kind of becomes their psoriasis self, becomes their new self, is very interestingly being addressed here in this ad, in that people are kind of wanting to tell people around themselves in their lives that I am not just my skin. I am, I'm my own person. Psoriasis is part of me, right? It's not alien to me. It's not something that I'm not saying don't look at my skin at all, but I am basically a whole person, and psoriasis is part of me. And this is basically that, this is a strategy for how you could possibly kind of address the rule of consistency heuristic and try to subtly communicate to patients who are not switching to newer therapies to potentially consider them. We're not showing the full ads just for the sake of time, but so these have been edited. But we're showing the parts where the heuristic is really the one that is that is coming through. Now, just to show you another ad, this is from depression category, which treats rule of consistency heuristic in a very different way. So let's play this.
I think of all the times when I've had to put on a brave face as I struggle to hide my symptoms of depression. I'm on an antidepressant. Why do I still have depression symptoms? I didn't want to let people down, so I hid my real feelings behind a mask. Enough. No more.
So now in this case, it's a very different treatment. In this case, the ad actually is using the patient and showing the patient confronting her own rule of consistency in depression. So she's admitting to the fact that she was making wrong or faulty decisions because of her need to want to appear to others around her in a certain way. But now she has realized that that is not good for her and she needs to stop doing that. That's a very different way of kind of addressing or talking to the rule of consistency heuristic. Two different disease states, two different insights, both driven by rule of consistency, two different marketing applications or executions in how the different brands or different ads are talking to that same heuristic. So we thought sharing these back to back and just looking at them through the lens of the rule of consistency heuristic, along with the non-pharma example, would help you understand and internalize what that is and how it might, if it is an important heuristic that drives customer decisions in your category, now you are better equipped to look for it and understand how it might be influencing decision making rationally or irrationally. We'll go to the next heuristic so that we can at least cover two. Our plan was to cover three. We knew we were being ambitious, but we most likely will cover two. The second heuristic we wanted to bring to your attention today, it's called peak and rule. And let's look at the definition of what peak and rule is. Peak and rule means that memories and experiences associated with something at its peak, they can drive decisions more than they should. So you can forget everything that came before that peak experience, what led up to that peak experience, what happened after that peak experience. All of that might have actually been quite painful and it might have lasted for a long time. It might not even have been very pleasant, but it's kind of overshadowed by the peak experience that you have. So this is an example. I mean, anybody who's in this class who is a fan of fishing, or you can replace fishing with any other activity where a few moments of joy are surrounded by long hours of wait of anything that you do. And you kind of sort of forget that you spent a lot of time and a lot of effort doing something and which only lasted for a very short period of time. And you are really driven by those few moments at its peak, disproportionately more than you should. So that's what peak and rule means. Let's take some examples to help bring this heuristic to life for you. Here's an example. This is on air right now. We're using a lot of kind of current communications, branded communications that are out there. If anybody in this class has young children, you would relate to this. So let me play this.
Hi, I'm Maya. I can't wait to see all my Disney friends on vacation and make a bunch of new ones.
It's Mickey and Pluto! And Pluto!
When we were walking on the ship, we saw Mickey and Pluto. I'll remember this forever.
So many parents would tell you going to Disneyland, Disney World, etc., they have amazing memories, etc., but they will also explain, standing in line for 45 minutes, getting to Orlando, how difficult it was with the 3 children, Parents will jokingly say, I need a vacation after my Disney vacation, just for the adults, for the parents, right? So it's like the few peak experiences and moments when you go to whether it's a cruise or Disneyland or anything like that, those are actually disproportionately driving your memory and your future desires or your future inclination to want to go back on that cruise or go back to Disney World. And Disney obviously knows that, whether somebody literally is sitting there and writing ads to peak and rule or not, it doesn't matter. They just intuitively know. So in their communications, they are very, very smartly feeding peak and rule. They're emphasizing all the things that create those peak memories and peak kind of experiences when you are there. Now let's look at an example from pharma. So in pharmaceutical industry, one of the examples that's very interesting, a disease state that is quite heavily driven by peak and rule heuristic, it's heartburn. And if anybody has worked in the heartburn category before, most heartburn sufferers, for them, heartburn is chronic. They suffer from it, and if it's a heavy, medium, or heavy sufferer, they're having a heartburn more than once a week. Yet, because heartburn happens in very hyper-acute episodes, lunch, you eat something, or you had a can of Coke with your sandwich at lunch, and you shouldn't have, boom, immediately your heartburn flares up. It's that kind of hyper-acute type of response. Instead of treating your heartburn condition, which normally other chronic conditions you wouldn't handle this way, right? You diabetes, hypertension, hyperlipidemia, et cetera, like there's a whole list of chronic conditions you would manage differently. But in this case, you kind of fall into this trap of managing one heartburn at a time. And because it's the peak and rule that makes you want just focus, it's the Disney peak and rule is all about the positive memories at peak. Heartburn is about the negative memories at peak. It can work either way, but it's at peak is basically what you're focusing on. And one of the leading brands in heartburn category very smartly leverages this heuristic in their communication. So let's see how they do that.
You know what I love, America? Fine barbecue, good times, and zero heartburn. You can't beat zero heartburn.
So in this ad, they do not have any kind of setup about what causes heartburn. You know, they don't show bad foods. They don't show him suffering. In fact, he basically is living a series of peak and moments. You know, he's just being Larry the Cable Guy. He's eating like anybody else. He is doing whatever, like he wants to almost. And through this communication, they basically very subtly but very persuasively communicate the idea that you can be heartburn free, which is not, for many patients that may not even be a reality, given how severe their heartburn may be. But this is a great example of using peak and rule and visualizing through communication, through your advertising, etc., feeding peak and rule, and he's living. It's kind of like saying, the saying, living the dream. He is living the dream, and by showing him doing that and emphasizing the peak end experiences, you really don't even have to talk about anything else. You communicate the point. So this is those two heuristics that we covered, rule of consistency and peak and rule. We did plan to cover a third heuristic, which we will cover on the next class then, which I'll just, since you can see, the name would be negativity bias. But the format of these master classes will be similar in the future, in that we will take 2, 3, whatever heuristics we can cover in 30 minutes, and we will help you understand what that heuristic is, how it drives decision-making in general, how give examples from a variety of different categories outside of pharma, and then very specifically also look at examples from pharma. I would like to show one slide as you leave, just so that you know where and how to at least use rule of consistency and peak and rule, is so that our goal is to teach you this science in a way so that you can apply it almost immediately. If you're working in a category where customers might have, and customers meaning physicians or patients or even payers, NPPAs, etc., there might be entrenched habits or processes or guidelines, etc. In a category like that, you are definitely going to find rule of consistency will exist, and it will potentially be driving irrational decision making. And if you're working in a category like that, you would want to dig into this heuristic. It will help you explain the psychology behind those habits. And if you're trying to change those habits, it will give you much greater ammunition on how to talk to customers to break those habits or change them. If you're working in a category that is driven more by milestones than processes, in those categories, peak and rule will be a friend of yours. You can define or create or own some milestones, find ways through marketing to associate your brand with milestones that can serve as peak experiences, peak memories, etc., better than other brands can do in your category. And that's how you can potentially leverage peak and rule to your advantage. Since we haven't talked about negativity bias, I'll ignore that for now. So these are just some ideas for how you can potentially look for ways to apply this science, or these two heuristics, I should say, in marketing, depending on what disease states or brands you're working on. So we'll stop here to respect your time, and feel free to provide us with feedback. This is a evolving masterclass series. We will adapt to your needs if we can. Possibly, there's a lot of people, but if there are things that you'd like to hear more or less about, we can try to accommodate that in the future. Otherwise, thank you for joining. We appreciate your interest in behavioral science, and you will get, if you have registered for the series, you will probably get invites for the next class next month.
Yeah, Nikita, that was what I was going to ask you. So since we attended this class, are we going to be getting invitations for these mini series moving forward?
Yes, if you have, when you registered, if you did, unless you tell us otherwise, if you don't want to get those invitations, we will not send them. But otherwise, yes, we will be inviting people who have registered. We'll be inviting them, for the rest of the classes as well.
Okay, thank you so much.
Yeah, absolutely. Any other questions or comments or thoughts? I went through things very quickly at a rapid pace, but I'm doing that knowing that all of you are very busy, and we will make sure that we in future classes we'll make sure that we'll kind of create a little bit more time for engagement and for question Q&A as well.